The note read, "Why did you go in alone? Your trainee cancelled." But I wasn't alone. Welcome to the Black Archive. Subscribe, turn off the lights, and let's open the files. I was sealed 15 feet underground, in a steel tomb, with a man my company never sent. I do pressure tests for Meridian shelter systems out of Spokane. Basically, I get locked inside a client's newly installed survival bunker for 24 hours and run diagnostics. Oxygen scrubbers, water filtration, structural integrity under simulated load. It's boring work and good money. The kind of job where the hardest part is staying awake. Early October, I got dispatched to a property about 20 minutes off US 95, north of Coeur d'Alene. Beautiful land, ponderosa pines, long gravel drive, a 2-story log home that probably cost more than I'd make in a decade. The bunker was buried in the backyard, under fresh sod. Top of the line, 12-gauge steel, HEPA filtration, the works. The property owner, a guy named Lyle Braddock, shook my hand at the hatch and told me he'd be back at the house. Said he'd leave the porch light on. Standard stuff. What wasn't standard was the trainee. HR had emailed me 2 days prior. A new hire named Garrett was supposed to shadow me for this lockdown. I'd never met him. He showed up 40 minutes before seal time in a company polo, clipboard in hand, smelling like peppermint gum. Young, quiet. Smiled a little too long when I introduced myself. We descended. I sealed the hatch from the inside. The 2-part epoxy they'd used on the filtration vents was still off-gassing. Sharp, chemical, the kind that drills into the space behind your eyes. Between that and Garrett's gum, the air already felt wrong. Around 1 a.m., the external proximity alarm screamed to life. I pulled up the perimeter cameras on the monitoring tablet and saw Lyle Braddock sprinting across his backyard in pajama pants, no shoes, banging both fists on the outer blast door. "That's the owner," I said. Garrett didn't look up from his clipboard. Probably forgot to tell us something. But Lyle wasn't knocking like someone who forgot something. He was hammering, like someone trying to get out of a fire. I toggled to the camera mounted directly above the hatch. Lyle was staring up into the lens. His mouth was moving, but the external mic was off, and I couldn't read lips through the fisheye distortion. "Should we unseal?" I asked. "We can't break protocol," Garrett said. His voice was flat, measured. "The whole point of the test is maintaining seal integrity for 24 hours. He was right, technically, but something about the way he said it, like he'd rehearsed it, made the hair on my arm stand up. Lyle disappeared from frame. I cycled through cameras. Nothing. Then he was back, pressing something against the lens. A piece of paper. I zoomed in, pixel by pixel, on the tablet. Handwritten, black marker, block letters. "Why did you go in alone? Your trainee cancelled." I read it 3 times. My stomach dropped through the floor. I turned around. Slowly, Garrett was standing 6 feet behind me. He wasn't holding his clipboard anymore. He was just standing there, arms at his sides, watching me with that same half smile. The peppermint gum smell was suddenly overwhelming. "Who are you?" I said. He tilted his head, just slightly, the way a dog does when it hears a frequency you can't. "Garrett," he said. "Garrett cancelled." My voice cracked. "The owner just told me." He didn't blink. Did he? I moved toward the emergency release panel near the hatch ladder. He didn't follow. He didn't need to. The bunker was 32 feet long and 8 feet wide. There was nowhere to go. That wasn't next to him. My hands were shaking so hard I missed the release lever twice. I hit the emergency unseal. Hydraulics hissed. The hatch cracked open and cold October air poured down. Lyle was at the top, reaching for me, pulling me up by both arms like I weighed nothing. "Who is that?" Lyle kept saying. "Who the hell did you bring into my bunker?" I looked back down the hatch. The interior lights were still on. The monitoring station was still humming. The bunker was empty. Coeur d'Alene EPD searched the property for 3 hours. They found no second person. No fingerprints on the clipboard except mine. I'd handed it to him when we entered. The company polo was folded neatly on the cot. No tag, no manufacturer. The seams were wrong, like someone had sewn it by hand. From a photograph, HR confirmed the real Garrett had called in sick that morning. He'd left a voicemail at 6:47 a.m. "I don't do solo pressure tests anymore. I don't do pressure tests at all. I quit Meridian 2 weeks later and moved back to Spokane." The exit interview asked why I was leaving. I wrote one sentence, because he knew the exact protocol for staying sealed inside. This next file isn't a police transcript. It's an audio diary, recovered from a cracked iPhone 11, found at the bottom of a rusted ladder shaft near Edgemont, South Dakota. The last entry was recorded in complete darkness. The Polaroid was still warm. The picture was the back of my own head, and I was alone. I bought the land of a tax lien auction in March, 4 acres outside Edgemont, South Dakota, right where the plains start folding into the Black Hills. Paid $8,000. The listing said, "Unimproved rural parcel, no structures." That was technically true. There was nothing above ground. I found the hatch on my second day, buried under 2 feet of hard, packed topsoil near the northwest property line. Heavy steel, painted olive drab, pitted with 50 years of corrosion. A padlock hung from the hasp, but the shackle had rusted clean through. I pried the hatch with a breaker bar and looked down into a concrete throat that dropped about 12 feet into darkness. Cold War fallout shelter, the real deal. Poured concrete walls, 2 rooms, narrow ventilation shafts running up to surface vents I hadn't noticed under the brush. Inside, collapsed wooden bunk frames, corroded water barrels, and a smell like wet calcium and old pennies. I was thrilled. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't. I started going down every day after work, hauling out debris, sweeping the floor, running an extension cord from my truck for a work light. On the back wall of the main room, someone had left a 1989 war calendar from Midwest Feed and Seed. It was sun-bleached and curling, but still legible. I almost tore it down, but something stopped me. Every single Tuesday, every one, January through December, had been violently scratched out with a blue ballpoint pen. The paper was torn through in places. Whoever did it had pressed hard enough to score the concrete underneath. I told myself it was some Cold War eccentric with a weird habit. I left the calendar up. By day 4, I started noticing things were off. Small things. I'd leave my flashlight on the folding table near the ladder and find it on the floor in the back room, standing upright, pointing at the wall. My water bottle migrated to corners I hadn't walked to. A tape measure I left near the door ended up coiled on the bottom bunk frame in the second room, laid out like someone had placed it there deliberately. I figured I was bumping things and forgetting. You get disoriented underground. No windows, no reference points. Maybe I was just tired. Then the sound started. The first time I was sweeping the main room and heard a low metallic scraping from the ventilation shaft above the back room, rhythmic, slow. I stopped sweeping and the sound stopped. I started again. The scraping started again. Same tempo, same cadence, same hesitation between each stroke. It was matching me. I stood completely still for maybe 90 seconds. Silence. I took 3 steps toward the ladder. 3 scrapes echoed from the shaft, spaced exactly with my footfalls. I told myself it was thermal expansion, metal contracting in the cold. I said it out loud actually, like hearing my own voice would make it true. The next day, I brought a digital recorder and left it running in the back room while I worked in the main room. When I played it back that night in my truck, there was 40 minutes of silence. Then what sounded like slow, deliberate breathing, and then my own voice saying, "It's just the metal," played back to me from somewhere inside the shelter, except I'd said that the day before. Not that day. I stopped going down for 2 days, told myself I was done. Then I went back. I don't know why. Curiosity is a kind of sickness sometimes. I brought a better flashlight and decided to check the second room more carefully. There was a narrow crawl space behind the rear bunk frame I hadn't noticed, partially blocked by a collapsed shelf. I moved the debris and squeezed through. A third room, smaller, maybe 6 by 8. No ventilation. The air was thick and tasted like rust. A single metal cot sat against the far wall, and on it, face up, was a Polaroid photograph. I picked it up. The chemical film was warm, not room temperature. Warm, like it had just been ejected from a camera. It was a photograph of the back of my head, my hat, my jacket collar, taken from behind me in this room. I spun around. The crawl space behind me was empty. The room was empty. The room was empty. I was alone. I am certain I was alone. I don't remember climbing the ladder. I remember being in my truck with the engine running and my hands locked on the steering wheel. And I remember that the hatch was closed when I looked back. I had not closed it. I drove to Edgemont and didn't go back for a week. When I finally returned with a friend and 2 flashlights, the third room was still there. The cot was still there. The cot was still there. The Polaroid was gone. The calendar was still on the wall, but someone had scratched out every Tuesday in a new year, 2025. Same blue pen, same desperate pressure. I sold the land 2 months later, didn't disclose the shelter. I know that's wrong. I think about it constantly. Last Tuesday, I found a blue ballpoint pen on my kitchen counter. I don't own blue pens. I never have. The final file tonight was pulled from an encrypted security log that surfaced briefly on a dark web data cache before being scrubbed. It originated from a decommissioned missile silo in central Kansas. What the guard describes has never been officially acknowledged. The blast doors didn't malfunction. They opened for fingerprints that belong to people who are still alive, still at home, and have never set foot in this silo. I took the night security job at the Concordia facility because it paid $32 an hour to sit in a chair and watch cameras. That's it. That was the entire job. The facility is a converted Atlas F missile silo about 9 miles outside Concordia, Kansas. Some development company bought it years ago and turned it into a survival condo. Luxury apartments stacked underground in a hardened cylinder that used to hold a nuclear warhead. The units go for north of $1 million each. Granite countertops, wine storage, a shared pool on sub-level 4. All of it sitting empty, waiting for the end of the world. I worked alone, midnight to 8. My security hub was on sub-level 2, a small room with a desk, a bank of 12 monitors, a mini fridge I kept stocked with Diet Dr. Pepper, and a biometric panel that controlled the blast doors between each level. The doors were serious. 3-inch steel, electromagnetic locks, and scanner authorization. Each level was sealed from the next. If I needed to lock down the silo, I could isolate every floor independently from my desk. I'd been there 4 months. Nothing ever happened. The most exciting event in my tenure was a raccoon triggering the surface motion detector in August. November 14th, 2:23 a.m. I was cycling through camera feeds the way I always did, mechanical, half asleep, clicking through empty hallways and furnished apartments no one had ever slept in. Sub-level 7, camera 3, unit 7B, the luxury suite with the home theater set up. Someone was standing in the corner. I sat up, leaned into the monitor. The figure was pale, not white-skinned, but pale the way something looks when it's been away from light for a long time, standing perfectly still in the far corner of the living room, facing the wall, arms at its sides. I toggled to camera 4, which covered the same room from a different angle. Same figure, same position. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a shadow. I checked the access log. No entries, no surface breach, no door authorization since my shift started. Sub-level 7 had been sealed since 6 p.m. I called my supervisor's emergency line, voicemail. I called the Concordia police non-emergency number and got a dispatcher who clearly thought I was losing it. "You're saying someone is standing in a room, 9 stories underground, in a locked missile silo?" "Yes, that's what I'm saying." She said she'd send someone to the surface gate. I went back to the monitors. The figure was gone from 7B. I started clicking through feeds. Sublevel 7, empty. Sublevel 6, empty. Sublevel 5, there, standing in the corridor outside Unit 5A, facing the blast door that led to Sublevel 4. Same posture, same stillness. It was moving up. I reached for the biometric lockdown panel on my desk. Sublevel 5 to Sublevel 4. I triggered a manual seal. The blast door's status light on my panel went red. Locked. I watched the monitor. The figure stood facing the sealed door for 11 minutes. I counted. Then the status light on my panel flicked from red to green. The door opened. I pulled the authorization log. The door had been opened by a verified biometric scan. The system displayed a name, Richard Alt, Unit 6A, owner. I knew that name. He was a tech billionaire out of Scottsdale. His unit was furnished, but he had never once visited the silo in person. His biometric data had been enrolled remotely, via a secure kit mailed to his home. The figure walked through the door and disappeared from the Sublevel 5 feed. I locked the Sublevel 4 door, watched, waited. 7 minutes. Green light, authorized scan, Diane Chen, Unit 4C, a venture capitalist from San Francisco, also never physically present at the facility. Sublevel 3. Green, Mark Esterhaus, hedge fund, New York, never visited. Each door opened with the living, verified fingerprints of people who were hundreds of miles away, people who were presumably asleep in their own homes. The system wasn't being hacked, it was being used correctly. Sublevel 2 was my level. The blast door to my corridor was 40 feet from where I sat. I heard the two-tone beep, B flat, F scan failed. Then again, B flat, F, then a long pause. Then the green light on my panel. Authorized. The name on the screen was mine. The door opened. The corridor lights were on. I could see maybe 30 feet of empty hallway. Then they went dark. I grabbed my flashlight and my keys and went for the emergency surface ladder behind the hub. I climbed 9 stories of rungs in the dark without stopping. My hands were bleeding by the time I hit the surface hatch. The police found nothing. The development company reviewed the logs and couldn't explain the authorizations. They told me it was a software anomaly. They told me to sign an NDA. I signed it because I wanted to stop talking about it. I quit the next morning. The company hired a replacement within a week. I heard from a former co-worker that the new guard lasted 3 shifts before requesting a transfer without explanation. I looked up Richard Alt a few weeks later. He posted on social media the morning of November 14, a photo from his home in Scottsdale, timestamped 7 a.m. He was alive. He was fine. His fingerprints had opened a blast door 9 stories underground in Kansas at 2:51 a.m. The last name the system logged that night, the one that opened the door to my corridor, it used my prints, but I was already on the other side, watching it happen. That closes the archive for tonight. 3 bunkers, 3 people who went underground looking for safety and found something already waiting. If you've worked a job like this, if you've seen something in a place where nothing should be, submit your file to the Black Archive, subscribe, hit the bell, and keep your doors locked. I'll see you in the next tape.